and welcome back to Israel with Aline. For those who don't know me, I am Aline, a Brazilian who has been living here in Israel for 11 years. And today I want to talk to you a little about the cost of living in Israel, salaries, and all that related to our daily life here in Israel. So if you are ready, let's get started. The first thing I want to remind you is that expenses are a very personal thing. It depends on many factors. For example, living in Tel Aviv is much more expensive than living in Beersheba. It also depends if the person is married, single, their daily routine, their preferences. So what we're going to talk about are some of the national averages and also a bit about how much my husband and I spend here in Israel on our daily routine. And also our expenses are in shekel, the local currency of Israel. I'm going to do the conversion to real, so you will also see the prices in reais on the screen. But there is exchange rate variation, so whoever watches this video in the future, if you want, you can Google and see what the dollar and the shekel are on the same day. The cost of living in Israel is higher than in Brazil, but we also have to take into account the salaries. The minimum wage in Israel is 5,300 shekel, which at today's exchange rate is 8,700 reis. And the average salary in Israel is 11,000 shekel, which is 18,100 reis. So the cost of living is also higher and the salaries are higher. But let's see now how much our daily life really costs, starting with the most expensive expense of all, which is housing in Israel. The average price of a 3-room apartment in Jerusalem, that means 2 bedrooms and a living room, is 4,020 shekel per month. But of course, it varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. It varies how new the building is. A lot of things vary. For example, where we live, the rent here is around 5,500 shekel. And if we compare this with the prices, for example, in Tel Aviv averages 5,670 shekel per month. But if we look at another city that is also beautiful, the city of Haifa, at the foot of Mount Carmel, climbing the mountain, a beautiful city but much cheaper, it averages 3 rooms, 2,560 shekel per month. Since housing is a very expensive price in Israel for students and young people, there are some ways to save. For example, I lived in the university apartments, in the dormitories here. All the big universities have housing, and the housing is much cheaper than these prices. Or also you rent an apartment and divide it among people. When I was single, I cohabited with an Italian girl in a Jerusalem city center apartment. And now let's talk about the other expenses. The first one is the ninth, which is how we would say would be equivalent to the property tax. The average in Jerusalem is 5,800 shekels per year. Because I say per year, because here it is paid annually. But that means it's 480 shekels per month. But it varies, of course, from apartment to apartment. It depends on the neighborhood. So here, for example, in our apartment, we pay around 7,000 per year. And another expense we have is VADBITE, which is the equivalent in Brazil to the condominium fee, which here is usually cheaper than in Brazil. We pay 230 shekels per month, which helps with the building's maintenance, cleaning, and all that. But for example, in the previous building where I lived, there was no condominium fee. We didn't pay. We took turns among all the neighbors. Everyone was young. We took turns and each one cleaned the building once, and so we didn't pay anyone a condominium fee. But this varies from building to building. But since Israel is a safe country and doesn't need security grills for not having any of that, the cost is really just cleaning and maintenance. In addition, we have the water bill. The bill is bi-monthly, which means it comes every 2 months. And we did the math, we pay on average 75 shekels per month, but this also varies quite a bit from family to family, and the slightly more expensive bill is the electricity bill. And we pay an average of 140 shekels per month, and we also have a gas bill. Here in Israel, most people have gas cylinders, and they keep swapping and buying a new cylinder each time it empties. Our building is different because we have piped gas and it costs 35 shekels per month. And we use gas here at home for 2 things. First, we have our gas stove, but also the apartment's gas heating. Why heating? Because we live in Jerusalem, it's in the mountains and it gets cold in the winter. So in the summer, the gas bill is lower. In the winter, it goes up, but it's around 35 shekels per month throughout the year. And besides living, we also need to get around. We don't have a car. It's a personal choice of mine and my husband's because car costs are high. I mean, here, besides buying the car, you have mandatory annual testing. You also have mandatory insurance in Israel, and gasoline costs 5.50 shekels per liter. That's why we prefer not to have a car, and instead we use public transportation. If you buy a ticket for a bus within the city of Jerusalem, it costs 5.90 shekels, but we can buy, for example, a monthly pass that costs 213 shekels per month. And those who want to save more can even buy a semester pass or an annual pass, and then the prices decrease even more. Perhaps you were a bit impressed with the costs in Israel, especially housing, but there are things in Israel that are cheaper than in Brazil. The first example is health. The health system in Israel is different from Brazil. Here it is a public-private partnership, and that means that all basic services of the public health system are free, and in addition, you can pay extra for some services that are not considered essential. So for example, if I want to do physiotherapy, I pay 27 shekels per session, it's an example. And we can also pay extra to have additional services monthly. So, my husband and I, we pay this extra, and each of us pays around 70 shekels per month to have these services. And it's the most expensive price for our age range. In Israel, there is a public and also private education system. Most schools are public and they are of good quality. This means that most of the education is free. You pay an annual fee of 50 shekels per child who is going to study. And besides that, you have the option to pay fees, for example, for school trips, end of year party, all these types of events, and it averages between 500 and 1,300 shekels per year. Per child, depending on the grade. Public education in Israel is from 3 to 18 years old. And now for children who are under 3 years old, education is mostly private and therefore more expensive. The nursery, where children up to 3 years old stay, costs on average between 1,700 and 3,600 shekels per month per child. Although there are also cheaper options, for example, a city nursery, a Jewish organization nursery, they can reduce costs and then they start from 700 shekels, but they are the minority and not the majority. And another big difference in Israel's education system compared to the rest of the world's education system, to tell the truth, is that in Israel they study 6 days a week. Here the week starts on Sunday and it goes until Friday. So the children study from Sunday to Friday. Although most adults, they work 5 days a week, that is from Sunday to Thursday. Friday is usually a shorter day. Some people don't work. Some people work half a day like schools. And Saturday is really the day of rest. And how do the universities in Israel function? The government subsidizes part of the studies. This means that each student pays 10,600 shekels per year to study at any university, any course. This is the price. For example, when I studied nutrition at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I paid this price, but I also had scholarships, so I even paid less than that. And for those who do a master's degree in Israel, the price is a little higher. It's 13,800 shekels per year, but they also often receive scholarships. And these universities also have some of the best universities in the world. For example, I studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. It was considered in 2018, for example, one of the top 100 universities in the world and has very illustrious founders such as Albert Einstein, Sigmund Freud. They were founders of the university, but there are also other wonderful ones: Tel Aviv University, Haifa University, Ternion, the Weizmann Institute. There are many wonderful universities in Israel. And besides universities, we have colleges. In Hebrew, it's Miklala. It would perhaps be equivalent to some private universities in Brazil. Some of them follow the same price as the universities. Some of them may be more expensive. And one expense that we can't live without is communication. It's the internet and the cell phone. The cell phone plan, for example, that I have, It costs 55 shekels per month, and it gives me the right to 50 gigs of internet and unlimited calls and text messages, which usually this part is also cheaper in Israel. And now the home internet, which is the one I'm using now, it costs us 100 shekels per month. And to be honest, I don't know how many megs it has. If anyone is interested, comment below. And I ask my husband and write for you. And now we get into a very complicated point of expenses, which is the supermarket, because it really varies a lot from family to family. For example, here at home, we eat practically only vegetarian, so we don't have expenses with meat, which is an expensive thing to buy in Israel, because most of the meat in Israel is imported. A lot, even from Brazil, Argentina, Latin America, sells a lot of meat to Israel. So it's an expense that is hard for me to estimate how much we really spend. To help, I have two things. First, I made a video walking around a supermarket in Israel and showing prices of some foods, so whoever wants it will be up here for whoever wants to watch. And besides that, I'm going to put here on the side, now in the addition, a table of some of the basic basket foods, how much the chicken, milk, basic things cost for you to also be able to look at and compare. And another thing that varies a lot is leisure. Here in Israel, we usually do a lot of things outdoors. So, for example, my husband and I, we have picnics, we walk in parks, we do a lot of leisure that doesn't cost us money, but there are also things that cost. So, for example, if you want to go to the cinema in Israel, a ticket costs on average 40 shekels per person. And if we go out to eat, if we are going to eat, for example, a falafel with soda, a simple snack, you can spend around 20 shekels on the snack per person. And if you're going to sit in a restaurant, we usually spend on average 70 shekels per person. Naturally, some restaurants will cost 50, while others will cost 200. It also depends on the restaurant and what you order. And one thing that, yes, is very, very, very expensive in Israel compared to Brazil is bars. Sitting in a bar in Israel, you usually pay an average of 25 to 30 shekels for a half-liter draft beer. This in Brazil is between 40 and 50 reais, which is much more expensive for two reasons. Labor in Israel is expensive, bar rents are high, so the place has more expenses. But besides that, Israel has high taxation on alcoholic beverages and cigarettes. It's part of the public policy to discourage consumption, especially to discourage youth consumption. So to sit in a bar in Israel and have a beer, folks, be prepared to spend 40 shekels. And also remember, it's not 40 shekels, it's 40 reais. And also remember that in Israel, when you go out to eat in bars or restaurants, it is customary to leave a tip between 10% and 12%. So for those planning to come to Israel, don't forget to leave a tip. It's considered good manners here in Israel. And some expenses that I can't exactly calculate here with you, but it's important to remember that they exist, are taxes. Income tax, social security, this varies according to your income, and also other things that come into the calculation. For example, those with children get a tax discount. Those who are married pay less tax than singles. I mean, there are a number of things that are calculated for tax and social security. In addition, international trips, the Israelis, folks, you have no idea how much they travel. It's super, super normal for Israelis to make 1-2 international trips a year. Including many Israelis spend seasons outside of Israel, for example. When young people finish the army, both boys and girls serve here. From the age of 18 after 2-3 years of military service, they go out to travel the world. Many go to Brazil. For those who live in Bahia, Rio de Janeiro, maybe you will find Israelis strolling around there. And they sometimes spend 6 months to a year traveling. And they usually travel also for the rest of their lives, making international trips. And this really can't be calculated here. But besides that, there are the expenses with clothes. And it depends how many brands people buy, how much new clothes. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not very consumerist. I try to have a minimalist wardrobe. So I have relatively little clothes. That's why you will sometimes see some of my shirts repeated in videos. It's an idea of not always changing things and throwing away, but there are people who like to buy more. And then the expenses are higher. And the last expense that exists in Israel also, that is a bit different, are wedding gifts. Here in Israel, normally young people tend to marry. Almost all my friends here, if not all, are married. And when you go to a wedding, you give a wedding gift. The wedding gift, folks, is money. You can also give a gift. But normally the idea is you give money to the couple. You say, okay, this is to help you start your life. If you need this money to pay rent, pay rent. If you need a fridge, buy a fridge. Do whatever you want. So those who are of marriageable age, like us who are 30 years old, we have many friends getting married. We also have to put, especially in the summertime when people get married, put money for the weddings. You can't go into all the details of all the expenses we have on a daily basis in Israel, but I wanted to give some values of salaries and expenses. And in my opinion, in my mere and simple opinion, I think the cost benefit of Israel, yes, is valid because the salaries are high, the costs are high, but you can live here with the salaries we receive. But this is my opinion. If I forgot something, sorry, you can ask me in the comments if you have questions about more prices and more specific things. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, share this video with your friends, leave that like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much and see you next time.